Welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name is Steve Boykinen. I am here in frigid, damp Boulder Creek, California. I am very pleased this morning to introduce a returning guest to the show. I actually got to meet him in person 2.5 weeks ago in Alexandria, Virginia, in front of the detention center where Chelsea Manning and Jeremy Hammond no longer reside. I'm not going to claim complete credit for that. I'll let Ian take some. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Ian Schlakman, how are you this afternoon, brother?
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Of course, man. I always enjoy our talks. I was very stoked to be able to finally meet you in person. Um, we
Yeah.
were supposed to be joined by Reverend Nanny Chambers this morning. She has taken ill. We hope her a very speedy recovery and all of the best because I cannot wait to finally engage with her when we're not under an overpass with a whole fuck ton of whistles. Um, let's talk about that for a minute because this has been a really amazing week in terms of actual fucking good news amid all of the fear mongering about the coronavirus and the panic that's ensued and the massive hoarding and the just orgy of capitalism that has resulted from mass hysteria. We found out very recently that, in fact, it was Friday, right? Friday or Thursday? That Chelsea man, it was Thursday, I think, maybe.
Yeah, it was Thursday. Yeah.
Um, we found out that Judge Stringa, who had so harshly imposed punitive fines and more jail time to Chelsea Manning, and was holding Jeremy Hammond in
Yeah.
contempt, both for their refusal to testify in front of a secret grand jury. That they had both been released from the custody of William G. Truesdale Detention Center, where you and I were a couple of weeks ago. Jeremy Hammond belongs now, and this is such a fucked up thing to say, belongs to the Bureau of Prisons. So he will
hmm
be most likely going back to the Oklahoma Minimum Security Detention Center where he was before they yanked him out and sent him to Alexandria. Chelsea Manning, free,
Yes.
free. Uh, and in less than 72 hours, her $256,000 in punitive fines and an additional $30,000 for "Hey, get back on your feet, girl" have been raised through GoFundMe.
Truly amazing. Absolutely amazing. I was a pessimist. I thought the amount of fines that the government was levying was just so astronomical that it was beyond crowdfunding. I think that was their intent, to make it such an astronomical amount that it would just ruin her young life, even outside of prison. And within what, a day and a half, I think the fundraiser was going on before that, but the bulk of the funds seem to be done within 2 days.
So
Absolutely
what had
astronomical.
happened is they took one of the old GoFundmes that was for her legal defense,
Right.
and they rolled that over into a new GoFundMe, and it was low. It was not a significant amount of money. It was like less than 20 grand. That turned into they had raised 267 roughly $1,000 because GoFundMe takes a vig when you raise money through them. They take a cut, and then you get to keep X amount of percent. So they had to reset their goal for the overages so that it would wind up being the $256,000 that she was fined $250,000 for refusing to walk into a perjury trap.
Yeah.
And it got raised. As you said, it was really 36 hours maximum, and it was there. And then today, early this morning, an additional like 30 some thousand was raised, and that's going to go directly to her for living expenses to get her stuff out of storage. She had stuff in storage for the
Yeah,
year that she was reincarcerated. I can
yeah,
only imagine that that's a few grand right there if they didn't outright sell her shit.
yeah. It's kind of funny because a lot of this takes place in Maryland, where I am. We could talk a little bit about Johns Hopkins as well and its role in the coronavirus if you want, because that's where Reverend Chambers is currently at, recuperating
Okay.
from her
Yeah.
illness. But also Chelsea Manning's right here in Maryland too. In fact, she ran for Senate here, and I could, it's so incredibly important to help her out. I mean, what the justice system has tried to do. I mean, I don't really feel like pulling words today. I think with everything going on nationally, there's no reason to sugarcoat things. I think the prosecutors are trying to do another Aaron Swartz on Chelsea Manning, literally trying to force her into a situation where the hopelessness was just so overwhelming, the amount of debt was so overwhelming, that she would be no longer be of this world. And I think that the outpouring of support that your organization has done, showing up actually to the prison, doing that whistleblower effort that we all did, reading her statement aloud, which was a absolutely beautiful and phenomenal statement. A lot of my friends that were there are pretty left wing socialists, and a lot of my comrades, I'm a socialist, a revolutionary socialist as well. I count myself in that, but a lot of them were not that familiar with the Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, Jeremy Hammond situation, and they were kind of like, well, how is it anti-imperialist? Is it really socialist? And then reading Chelsea Manning's statement aloud about the standing in solidarity, refusing to participate with the grand jury investigation, calling it akin to the Star trials that she talked about, and the kangaroo court system, was just so universally inspiring. And as you mentioned, we had Reverend Chambers there, who is once in a while I call her a former Black Panther. But
Mm-hmm.
she gets really mad at me when I call her a former Black Panther. She says there's no such thing as a former Black Panther. She's still in the struggle. She's still fighting in public housing for housing justice right now and all sorts of kinds of things. But the Chelsea Manning's letter also touched on the grand jury investigation being used against the Black Panthers, going after them secretly behind the scenes, and other radical activists throughout the years. So I mean, it's a phenomenal testament to her strength to compose such a beautiful letter behind bars, to keep up her activism in spite of such ridiculous odds. And now I think the outpouring of support with her being released and having a home that she'll be able to afford and go back to, at least for a little bit of time, is just so touching. It's a really beautiful statement.
Yeah, I feel like we in the activist community really needed something like that.
Yeah,
Because it's been rough going, to be perfectly honest. Like we felt really good about what we were able to accomplish in DC and in Alexandria in front of that prison when we got back, and we had more on our plate than we could even think about dealing with. And
yeah,
teach-in scheduled for as early as the end of this month, and then this fucking coronavirus came in, and it killed free assembly. It killed a lot of free speech in a way, in its own way, the way that it normally does, through stamping out opinions that run counter to the narrative. Now there's such a cyclone of misinformation about this thing that it was easy for a lot of people to just be like, fuck man, I'm checking out, checking out. And then boom,
yeah,
uh the day before Friday the 13th, a year to the day,
yeah,
uh, uh from when Chelsea was originally reincarcerated. And people do forget that this was not just a reincarceration, but a reincarceration. She her sentence was commuted as Barack Obama was leaving office. She had 18 months. As you mentioned, she ran for Congress.
Senate.
She had one of the best campaign ads that I've ever seen. Andrew, our Action for Assange awkward puppet master, um, he's been playing that campaign ad. He closed out the show Wednesday with it. Thursday we went live to break the news that Chelsea had been released and Jeremy had been ordered back to Oklahoma, but no longer in contempt in Virginia at the Eastern District Court. And he opened the show with it. Then, like it's how much he loves this campaign ad, because it's Chelsea Manning just laying it out in terms of, this is wrong, here's what I'm gonna do, this is what we need to do, everybody's acquiescing, I want to fight. And like, she kept that up through her reincarceration. And we Susie Dawson was nice enough to join us Wednesday night on the Free Assange Vigil. And we talked about, because we were just finding out that Chelsea had attempted suicide, and we talked about what we thought that meant and what they were trying to, what it was, what it was a result of. And I believe you're right that they were trying to make her so hopeless, break her so much, charge her so much, that they wanted her to end her existence, because a world without Chelsea Manning in it is way easier for the people in power who commit war crimes and want to cover it up.
Well, I could also tell you that as someone who was in Maryland when she was running for Senate, and I had the privilege of meeting her at an anti-fracking rally, I think, while she was running. The way that the media treated her campaign was just a complete mess, a nightmare. I mean, I'll say this: I don't think they treated Chelsea's campaign as a joke, but they treated it as a beyond a horse race. Like, it was just all about her personally. And I'm sure that, when I've been involved in quite a few campaigns now, I can just tell you there's no greater way to piss off a candidate and to kind of drive them up the wall is by just completely focusing on them personally and their personal backstory and kind of making them into like a villain or someone unqualified. I mean, it's just the complete lack of press coverage on the issues. I mean, that video never made the rounds here in Maryland. It was never really something that the media talked about. It was all about, it's hard to even describe the kind of like trashing they gave to her when she was running. And it wasn't even like in a way that you'd expect. It was almost like treating her like as a former villain or former ex-con / someone really unqualified, I guess you could say, just like completely ignoring any issue she brought up, completely ignoring anything to do with war crimes or human rights violations or issues at home, just completely ignoring it. And that's the way they deal with top Democrats here in the state that she was running after, that she was running to take their seats. The senators here, once they get in their office, they are protected, I dare say, by the media. I mean, they're untouchable. I mean, I think there was I think it might have been before Chelsea Manning was running. One of the top Democratic leaders here, Steny Hoyer, was caught, like, basically saying that they're going around rigging elections, putting massive amounts of cash into establishment primary candidates so that they wouldn't have to deal with challenger primaries. It would be such an unequal race, it wouldn't matter. And, I mean, he was on record saying this kind of stuff, but yet media doesn't care. I mean, it was broadcast, I think, on some independent outlets that he was doing it. He was on tape. He got caught doing it. Never got any real play here in Maryland at all. And it's a Maryland congressman, I believe. So it was just completely ridiculous in a very high-ranking leadership office that they're essentially backing the campaigns of all these establishment candidates. but they never want to talk the issues. I mean, I've been on stage once where actually, the first time I ran for office was in 2014, and I ran because I was inspired by Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning and the WikiLeaks revelations. They were just stunning. They were just absolutely stunning. And the fact that we had a congressman here, another Maryland congressman, Dutch Ruppersberger, who was basically pro spying, pro NSA, and like so pro NSA and pro spying that they basically had to remove him from the committee because he was outflanking the Republicans on handing over powers and giving support and backup to the spying community, the NSA and the FISA courts and whatnot. It was a total joke, and I got to debate him on stage, and every single issue, it was obvious that I mean, I don't know how else to say this other than the fact that I was way more prepared than he was. He didn't even know the time limits on what to speak on. He had no idea what he was talking about. And, the things he talked about were like Social Security is good. Public transportation's okay. Cars are good too. I mean, it was like such basic nonsense. And getting him on spying issues, I mean, I think I did get him a stuff that. I got him to admit, I said that you called Edward Snowden a liar, and he corrected me and said, no, I called Edward Snowden a traitor. So, I mean, and Edward Snowden was someone who lived in his district. This could have been his representative had he not moved to Hawaii, Edward Snowden. So, I mean, this is lunacy that your own constituent is telling you that there's all these massive FISA court violations and the NSA is running wild, and here's the proof, and your response is this guy's a traitor. I mean, it's completely insane. But that's the way, I mean, these politicians are literally never challenged. They're never challenged. They're never held accountable. It never happens. I've never even seen a politician really lose their seat over a spying or a high crime issue like the FISA courts or the NSA. And you got to think about how ridiculous this is because, just a couple months ago, we had the Republicans in the midst of the impeachment saying how completely unfair the FISA courts were to Trump. And it's like, well, where have you been? I mean, the whole anti-spying, pro-open source, pro-hacker community has been trying to get your attention on this for decades. And Edward, for at least 10 years, Edward Snowden has been releasing leaks about this. You're calling him a traitor. It's just absolutely insane. But it goes to show you that this is not a Democrat or Republican issue because the Democrats, so many of them are worse on the issue than the Republicans now. But yet, when it comes time to renew the bill, which they just did earlier this week, they just renewed, I believe, a pro-spying legislation or another piece of legislation that lets them continue the FISA courts.
Yep.
There was no debate on it. Nope. None. The only reason I know about it, and maybe you're like me, and the only reason you know about it, is because Tulsi Gabbard went to Twitter and tweeted about it. Otherwise, I would know nothing about this situation. It's completely insane.
There's a Twitter account at Truly Progressive. I don't know whether they're male or female. They are frequently in the chat on Action for Assange when we do the vigils. Think I've seen them here before once or twice. But we always get tagged in these posts, and I got tagged in a post about the renewing of the FISA courts and what. So that's how I found out. And then about 6 hours later, I saw that Tulsi had tweeted out about it too. We're also facing the end of personal encryption. This is a bill that Lindsey Graham has been pushing, but gets a lot of Democrat support too, because as you said, it's one party when it comes to the national security state. They're trying to sneak it into the next stimulus package. The end of personal encryption. That means every app that we have is either no longer going to be available or is going to be updated with a backdoor for law enforcement built into it. The ones that don't already have it, the ones that do, by the way, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, there's a bunch more. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know that for a while, Slack, Discord, I know that for a while the activist community was really trying to uh, push WhatsApp, and that
Mhm.
is dangerous to me because it comes with a built-in way for law enforcement to read everything that you're writing there. And we know that that can be twisted and construed and used against activists because we joke from time to time. And some of those jokes, when you work in a dark environment, come out dark, you know.
Mhm.
Um, I would like to make a huge distinction between making sick jokes and advocating violence. Like, at no point uh, in the activist sphere should you ever trust anyone who advocates violence because that's who your fed is. Here in Santa Cruz County, we had for a number of years a guy called Travis T. Hip, and he would do news and commentary in the morning on K-Pig Radio out of Freedom, California. And Travis was an old school, went to Berkeley in like 65. Um, and while he was at Berkeley, he was part of like a gaming society called like the Elves, Dwarves, Gnomes Marching Band or some ridiculous shit like that. They were geeks that were playing an early version of Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing. And they got put on a watch list and they got surveilled and they had someone show up telling them that he knew where he could get some explosives. And they're like, you can go now, officer. Like, we're just dorks, you know? But he would frequently close out commentary with that story and be like, if four or more people gather in the name of activism and one knows how to get weapons, they're the Fed. And we see this a lot. We saw it in DC. It happened to us. Um, I'm not sure why I told that story now, but I think I just wanted to invoke the memory of Travis T. Hip. Um, but no, it just goes back to the encrypted software thing. Like
Yeah.
with the coronavirus, the response to it, especially on the part of the people in power, seems to be let's go for a giant rights grab and end encryption as we know it, end free assembly as we know it. Um, well, I honestly do believe, Ian, that we're heading for a martial law scenario.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I actually play Dungeons and Dragons too, and I often find myself typing in something like witch beheading hexes and stuff like that, and I'm like, man, it's not going to be the activism that's going to get me on that government watch list. It's going to be that right there, because it's hilarious. I try to be as joyless as possible in my activism, never making any jokes, just straight dead face, no funny stuff, and it's just a complete waste of time. You might as well just you can't win. You can't win. Anyway, but look, I really want to get this out there because I've got a couple of really radical projects that I'm working on that I want to touch on, in the time we have today. And I want to just start by saying that all I, the major majority of politicians in DC at this point are literally scared shitless because they have almost nothing that they personally know how to do around the coronavirus. It's really got to be led up by experts and scientists at this point and public health officials. And B, I guess because they're getting huge checks or because they're being told what to do or because they're just idiots, they are actively participating in ridiculous bullshit, such as, let me give you an example. I mean, you see the constant naming and shaming of China as the start of the coronavirus, and also as the simultaneously shaming them for having too much of a lockdown or not locking down enough. It's both ways. Both of them are the problems. Okay, I guess that makes sense somehow. Yet their response here in the U.S. is, let's renew all these FISA courts, NSA spying bills right away. Let's end encryption behind the scenes and not talk about it with anybody. This has nothing to do with coronavirus. No one's life is going to be saved because they can kill encryption now. It doesn't make any sense. It has nothing to do with anything. And you know what? I mean, I think it kind of shows you the futility of this style of government and this style of economics. Because within what? It's been like a month now with the coronavirus, I think you could say. And easily things are getting more worse by the minute, growing at an exponential rate. The economy that we have in this country literally wasn't built for anything like this. People's whole entire businesses, fortunes, savings accounts, IRAs are vanishing in front of them. It's like, I hear about, the closing of one thing after another. Okay, schools. Okay, that makes sense. Big stadiums, auditoriums. It's fine. Mark Cuban could lose a little bit of money with the Mavs. Who gives a crap? Then you hear about restaurants, and you're like, man, I mean, that immigrant family, near me, needs that money weekly to live. Now that sucks. Like, that's awful. And then you're going to go down the list from there, because our entire distribution of goods we need to survive are in Walmart, Target, Sam's Club, Costco, and other giant grocery store chains. And they are going nuts. People are losing their minds over this coronavirus thing. They're running into Costco, grabbing all the toilet paper off the shelves. I mean, I've been trying. People are asking me all the time, what's going on with this? How does this make any sense? I'm like, it doesn't make sense. You hoarding toilet paper will have no ability on you surviving the coronavirus or not. Like, it has nothing to do with reality. But there's like no political leadership. None. There's no political leadership saying in a calm, rational voice, stop taking toilet paper. Because I guess they want people to buy toilet paper to make up for the lack of sales going to like other places. It's just a lunacy economy. Like this just.
I'm gonna tell you what, man. All the toilet paper in the world isn't gonna make up for no NBA season, no Major League Baseball season, no hockey season. Not like we're talking about no fucking music festivals, none of that shit. Tourism, dead. Sports and entertainment, dead. Bars closing.
Yeah.
Which is coming. Mayor de Blasio hasn't closed the bars yet, but he is trying to work with the federal government to get the military on the streets of New York. And $1.5 trillion pumped into the stock market in one day to be spent in a matter of hours. And yet we can't have a healthcare system that is modeled after the same universal healthcare systems as the rest of the industrialized world. We can't have tuition-free college like most of the rest of the industrialized world, but we can pump $1.5 trillion into the stock market. We can give a $1.5 trillion tax cut to fucking billionaires, and we can have $1 trillion military budget, and nobody ever says, A, that's socialism, or B, how do you pay for all of that?
And they did it without any laws being passed. The laws that they're passing are all about encryption and empowering government authorities and stuff like that to then do stuff later on. The stock market thing was just like, oh, by the way, 1.5 trillion was deducted into the stock market today. It's like, excuse me? Wait, hold on. That's important. We should go back to that. Where's your story about this? You can't just mention it on the daily rundown on Bloomberg or CNBC and then not talk about how, first of all, it had no effect. Second of all, who authorized it? And third, why can't the Department of Health authorize 1.5 trillion to go into hospitals? Department of Education, 1.5 trillion to go into distance learning for schools? I mean, it shows you right now that so many of the things that we were told you can never get done, such as like, free college. Well, okay, everyone has to distance learn right now. If you even want to continue college at all, why can't we just pump up money into that system? I mean, literally, and this is what's so wacky about this, is like the federal government is doing all it can to bail out corporations and the stock market. And yet you see corporations like Google and Zoom now saying, okay, we're going to open up our products because of the coronavirus crisis to help schools and universities get distance learning to their kids. So, I mean, I'm not here to applaud them, even though I do like that. I work in schools. I'm glad they're offering that. What I'm here to say is they could have done that years ago. Everything is built on a lie. They're just greedily grabbing at money when times are good. And now that times are bad and there's a crisis, they're admitting, oh yeah, this is all software. Yeah, it's not going to overload the servers. Just go ahead. Like it's just a complete fiction. Like we've been lied to for years. And I think finally the curtain is unveiled. And for those of us that can take a break after we, made sure, we've got enough supplies for the week, calm down a second, and then come online here with us, and let's have a chat about how everything they've been telling you about the economy is a complete lie. Let's talk about that. And then let's make some plans on how to redo the economy when this crisis is over. Because let's face it, they've pulled the curtain away. They've shown that everything they've been charging us for, they don't really have to. We can have an economy based on the needs of people, based on making sure everyone has good health care, making sure everyone has access to decent quality food. We can build a system and an economy making sure everyone not just has access to free education, but that you could access it at a moment's notice. You could literally at midnight see an MIT college professor that you would never be able to afford give a talk that he gave earlier that day. The whole system of class and capitalism is a myth. And it's now been pulled, the curtain's been pulled back. We've got to continue this effort once this crisis is over. We've got to understand this while this crisis is happening. We'll have plenty of time to sit on our computer and listen to great shows like yours, Steve. And that's why I'm glad you have me on, because now we can start to have a real discussion about this. And then when this crisis is over and people are like, okay, back to normal, get out there and go to your crappy jobs. Be like, fuck no, I'm not going to go back to my crappy job. Why can't I continue to learn from Harvard master classes? Why can't I continue to get free shit from the pharmaceutical companies, like test kits, or I don't know, maybe anything else I need to live? Why can't I go get, why can't there be a different kind of system for how we distribute food and toiletries in this country? Because let's be honest with you, while capitalism's great, okay, I've got 8 different kinds of Charmin toilet paper that'll feel different on my ass. That's wonderful, great. At the end of the day, you really just need a brand of toilet paper in your home at all times. Like you don't really need the brilliant invention of capitalism, which is a million different freaking kinds of toilet paper. That's not going to help you become a better person. I can promise you that. It's going to be better if we switch to a system of socialism. I don't just mean a reform type socialism. I don't mean Danish socialism. I mean revolutionary socialism. We're proving the fact that our system for getting goods into your hands that you need to live is really, really, really bad. It doesn't work well. In the times of crisis, it's completely kind of failing. Let's just be frank here. So we've got to completely switch over. We're not going to be able to survive the next crisis or the next crisis or the next crisis. And the world's getting smaller. People are able to move throughout the world way more easily now. We're talking about like big, important humanity milestones, like going to space more often, making space travel a part of our everyday lives. Mining asteroids or going to the moon or going to Mars. I mean, like these are amazing humanity type accomplishments. And the answer isn't let's commercialize it. Let's make a profit. Let's make a buck. Like we have to literally tell the establishment to fuck off with that attitude. I'm glad I'm on your show so I can curse, because like this is really pissed me off. Because like anyone that says we should be commercializing or capitalizing anything, in my opinion, really needs to explain themselves. Because I think the institutions of capitalism that we adhere to have completely broken down with the coronavirus. And I think that we're going to see more and more crises come our way. This isn't just going to be a one-off event. And we're going to have to come together as a human species to figure out how to do this. And I'm not just talking about, state capitalism, like I think they have in other countries. I can go into that a little bit. I'm not talking about more draconian control. I'm talking about admitting that the way that we ration out goods to people and the fact that we don't actually make sure that things are a human right. Like you don't have an actual guarantee to housing. You don't have a guarantee to toilet paper, apparently. You don't have a guarantee to healthcare. You don't have a guarantee to college. Like all of this stuff that we don't guarantee, we have to completely put on its head and say, okay, we don't have enough scientists, we'll die. If we don't have enough people that understand engineering, bridges will collapse. We don't have enough people in the streets to understand how to fix our infrastructure, we won't have running water. Like that's the kind of thing we need to address as a society. Fuck the stock market. Seriously. I fuck it right in its face. Who the fuck needs the stock market? I don't care about the stock market at all. I care about being able to get goods distributed across the country to people that need it, and then across the world. This is a conversation that we need to have.
You know what? I couldn't agree more. And I know that like the more conservative side of the libertarian axis that watches this show is just going fucking nuts right now. And I want to have this conversation because just this morning, a guy that I've known for about 20 years, I met him when I was doing Renaissance festivals for a living. He went by the name Minister Sinister at the time. He was on Art Bell's show as the Minister Sinister. He's performed all over the place. He was from Ohio. He's down in Florida now. When I met him, I think he was a card-carrying communist. Now he's a full MAGA Trump guy.
Wow.
And he was like going off on socialism and and he was getting it wrong, and he was getting it wrong on purpose. You know, because his thing now is apparently misleading people and guiding them to the MAGA hat. And I'm like, dude, you know that what you were just describing is state capitalism. Socialism means the means of productions go to the workers. That's more or less all socialism. It's describing where the means of production go.
Right.
In the same way that MMT describes how money is created and allocated. It's less a system and more a description, and people have taken that to mean whatever they want it to whenever it's convenient. State capitalism. And I believe that Andrew and I have had this conversation. I believe that the United States functions as more or less a Stalinist outfit of state capitalism. We've just merged it with corporate fascism, economic fascism. State capitalism means that the means of production go largely to the government, who then allocate it to a very small amount of people, and some of that eventually gets washed down into the workers. Do I have that basically right?
Yeah. Pretty much. I mean, it basically means that capitalists have all the controls. The state is propping up. So that's why I get into a fight with libertarians all the time, because it's like the state, the free marketplace, or the idea of capitalism being innovative. There's elements of that, but in reality, the state is in control. The state is telling you where you can exchange and where you can't. And I think that just empowers libertarians to then say, well, then we don't need a state. Okay, I get that. But I have a hard time understanding how, I could get into this a little bit further, but I really want to make sure that people understand that if the way that we currently have our government set up, the U.S. is the imperialist power of the world in order to protect and maintain state capitalism. So it's all kind of state capitalism. Like the markets that exist are all sanctioned by the state. When you have a black market, a non-state sanctioned market, then the feds come in and crush it and all that kind of shit, and they take the money. So I mean that's sort of the way the current system kind of works. But really, what you said earlier was dead on. Like socialism is literally about returning the means of production to the workers. Now let's just take a couple of examples. So like, I don't know, flu vaccines or aspirin. Aspirin, by and large, has been was something made here in the U.S. Now it's made in China. Lots of different vaccines made in India, made in China. So many different medicines are not made in the U.S. If workers had control, if the workers of the local vaccine creation plant back in the 80s we're told, hey, guess what? It's cheaper and maybe more efficient to move your production to China. So what do you guys want to do? Because the workers are in control. The people that actually run the factory floor are in control. Let's take a vote. Keep growing and making vaccines here in the U.S. or move them abroad. I am 100% certain that they would say, we want to keep making them here in the U.S. because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that you kind of need local ability to produce medicine. Because if there's ever a global crisis like we're experiencing right now, you won't be able to get it from abroad. I don't care if it's cheaper to make abroad. It doesn't matter that it's cheaper to make abroad. And that whole notion of cheaper doesn't mean efficient. You have to understand that. Like, so if we actually had a socialist, well, we do. We have Cuba is probably the closest example we have worldwide to a socialist government. Venezuela has a lot of socialist politicians in it, socialist leaders in control. They still have, for what I understand from my comrades, who some of you met last week at the Chelsea Manning demonstration in People's Power Assembly, still has a capitalist class, which is just kind of fucking everything up over there. So you have the limited resources that you have, and then you have to have workers in control in the factories that they do the work in, and you work with the government to say, okay, what are we going to build here? What are we going to make here? When is it efficient? When is it not? I mean, capitalism is not efficient. People need to understand that. Capitalism can be cheap because making products cheaply across the world in slave labor shops is going to make the capitalist who runs the company more money. They're going to make more money. Their investors on the stock market are going to make more money if they move that factory overseas, if they hire the cheapest possible labor, if they skirt labor laws here in the U.S. and open a sweatshop. Those are the kinds of things that take place under capitalism. Under a socialism, or dare I even say, I'm not even supposed to go here, but I think with the crisis, I'm going to go there. Under communism, which was, if you actually read Marx, kind of the ultimate goal, to create a situation where the workers are 100% in control to a point where, you don't really need the state anymore. You have a complicit understanding that the factory being in existence that makes medical facilities for a region needs to exist. The workers want to contribute to society in that fashion. Progressives kind of get this concept. If you look at the auto bailout that the Obama administration did, along with Biden, don't forget, his good job was to inject money into the auto industry, save those companies, and then hand the companies right back over again to the capitalists that fucked it up in the first place. And Obama was very clear about this because he was immediately called a socialist and said, I'm going to hand it right back over to capitalists. That makes no sense. And even everyone from, I think, Kshama Sawant at the time to Michael Moore literally said, why can't the workers actually be in control of the damn factories? This doesn't make any sense. We want them to build something. We want them to have jobs. We want them to contribute. We want that factory to still be here in the U.S. producing cars. Or Michael Moore's suggestion at the time was turn them into a train factory. This is just stupid shit that we do under capitalism. But because we just don't have the ability to say, gee, maybe everyday people that make our economy go know what they're talking about. Maybe everyday people that are working in a factory understand that their good provides a service for people. Maybe people that actually grow the food, like farmers, actually have a vested interest outside of just getting paid to contribute to do that. Maybe they want to feed people. Maybe they want to build stuff. Maybe they want to help their community. Maybe they understand this as a regional good. That's the kind of thing that we just don't get anymore. Everyone is just so under the gun to produce, to have enough money to live, that we've completely taken out the concept of why we even do this to begin with. Nothing pisses me off more than seeing reports about the construction industry. The construction industry has to make new homes all the time, or else the whole construction industry will have a ton of problems. We have so many houses in Baltimore that are vacant, that are dying of people to come in and rehab them. We have workers who are literally in construction jobs building new houses who would have no problem rehabbing houses in Baltimore. They just want to make sure they have enough money to live and have a subsistence wage. And then you have people in Baltimore who are literally unemployed, who are looking for a job. We have this Youth Works program in Baltimore that employs like thousands of kids, and they have this massive line of high schoolers looking for a job. The second the Youth Works program opens up, why don't we have an Adult Works program for people that need jobs? And say, we need houses rehabbed in Baltimore. Our plumbing system is from like the early 1900s, and part of it is wooden. Like wooden plumbing is underneath the sewer system in Baltimore City. I can't, why isn't that modernized? Because capitalism doesn't care. I mean,
I can tell you right now that here in Santa Cruz County, I have had to unearth and then walk away from the job site and bring in actual septic people because there are still redwood septic tanks out here in the ground from like back in the logging days and from back, pre-World War II and stuff like that. I do work in construction. I don't work in new construction. I work in rehabbing houses and remodels, and very rarely do I get to do any kind of new construction at my job. And when new construction takes a hit, we take a big hit too, because the economic fear that gets disseminated from a slowdown in new construction makes people stop wanting to upgrade or rehab their properties. Because if there aren't any new houses being built, there aren't any houses that are being sold or flipped either, because everybody's putting their money into something else. And it causes a giant ripple effect. And this is one of those things where like the capitalism as both a supernatural belief system and an economic system has utterly failed us. Very early on in Slow News Day's history, I had Rod Placone on the show, and we had to talk about, is capitalism a religion? And I think my particular viewpoint is yes, it is a supernatural belief system, which is why I've always advocated some sort of collective ascension and moving to a cashless society, because the work is still going to get done. But if your means are met in terms of not necessarily like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but along the lines of that, where you have food, you have shelter, you have, you don't have to go get your avocados from Mexico or Peru because they're cheaper to grow and ship than they are to grow here in California, where they grow fucking naturally in the goddamn first place. And that's way the fuck out there, like in terms of where we need to be as a society. But I think a giant reset that we're going to be experiencing can go one of two ways. It can go the way that the governments of the world seem to be pushing, which is complete lockdown, a martial law style existence, or it can go to a genuine people's uprising where we come together through shows like this, through just the ability of the internet to have these conversations, because when people are quarantined, they still need some sort of contact, and this is as close as a lot of people are ever going to get when that self-quarantine becomes mandatory. Through the sharing of accurate information, we can, I do believe, come together as a society and demand a reset of how our systems operate. This does present an opportunity to do it. Unfortunately, the people with most of the means and all of the power have a completely different viewpoint, but there's always more of us than there are of them.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm really glad to hear that conversation about capitalism being a religion. Because if you look at like the first metric they always talk about on the market reports at the end of the day is consumer confidence, consumer confidence, consumer confidence. They want people to have the confidence to keep buying and spending in the ways they normally do. And whenever that breaks down and people start literally, it's a common economic principle. Like when people start putting money away in savings, economists get jumpy because they're like, why are they saving money? Why don't they just spend? Why aren't they participating in the economy? And then at the same time, some douchebag conservative economists or will go out there and say, why didn't people save for times like this? What's wrong with people? And it's but we never question it. We never actually talk about how ridiculous the system is in its current capacity and its current form. So it is easily a religion. And I can tell you right now, religion is not going to save us because out there right now, we need, imagine if we had a more educated population in the U.S. Imagine if everyone got an extra year or two of college for free. Just like a fucking free associate's degree that had all the basics in there of healthcare science and biology. People would know what to do. People would understand what to do. People would understand why the quarantines. People would understand what's going on. Imagine if we had that same attitude towards engineering or the basic sciences or building as a craft. Imagine if people got that extra information for free, like we already do for high school. But even that is particular to a certain area. A richer area is going to have better schools. Poorer area is going to have worse schools, and we just
because
don't
we
care.
tied education to property tax.
Exactly.
What the fuck is that all about? Other than we want to create an elite class and a servant class, and it really pisses me off. I graduated high school in 1996. I was one of the last. I was the last class where vocational and technical school was offered as a part of your last 2 years of high school. The town I grew up in, Anderson, Indiana, mentioned in Chris Hedges' book, Democracy, the Farewell Tour, or America, the Farewell Tour. It was a GM town. It was GM was the number one employer. Now the Church of God University and the university system there is the number one employer, which is a whole different world of problems and incredibly funny stories. But when in 1995, GM started shutting down a lot of plants. And the AC Delco facility that employed the vast majority of people in the town changed names. They became Delphi or something like that. But all of the kids that had gone to Votech were like, I don't know what I'm going to do now. From the time that I was 5, I knew that I was going to go work with my dad and my brothers and my uncles in the fucking GM plant. And, union gigs, everybody had, not everybody, but a vast majority of the people that worked for GM, like, had a couple of cars and a boat and a lake house and good health insurance and all that kind of shit because they were union employees. And as Indiana slowly transitioned from both agriculture and automobile manufacturing into a right to work state that had a couple of new plants come in, but everybody went from making 28, $30 an hour to 10, $12 an hour with a minimum of 50 hours a week, no overtime and no benefits. The entire place sort of collapsed, and now it's like famous for being the district that Mike Pence was a representative from. Crystal methamphetamine and jobs at like a racetrack. That's where you got the racetrack or the church. And that's like it. It's fucking it's nuts.
Yeah.
And that's pretty, that's a microcosm of manufacturing towns all throughout the country. But we could, if we weren't so religiously devoted to capitalism, we could have a resurgence of manufacturing that actually benefited people instead of a bottom line or shareholders quarterly.
You know, I, 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 I completely agree. And you know that story about your hometown is the exact same story that I hear. You know, when I talk to folks that have been in Baltimore for a really long time. I mean, you could just walk into Baltimore and the next day be employed at a can company or something like that. You know, nowadays it's almost impossible to find a job. So many folks are going down to DC to get that six-figure job because they can't even afford rent in Baltimore. It's freaking ridiculous. But you know, I think you know, to me, one of the largest disappointments about this political season has been, you know, and you know, you know, just because of the crisis and all that, I just feel like I have to say this is the lack of is the lack of imagination of people that call themselves socialists. Let's just be very clear on this. So, you know, I think we're in a time right now where we're literally debating Medicare for all, and we're going back and forth on it, going back and forth on free college tuition. That's great. Those are really, really great. But you have all these political folks saying, okay, you know, maybe sort of Medicare for all, maybe Medicare for some, maybe, you know, like let's take a step back. Let's go backwards. Let's not see that out and really focus on socialism and what that means. And instead, I felt, and when and, you know, I've been saying this for years. Every campaign I run, I say this: we should be going further. When you talk about why Medicare for all, you have to say because insurance companies suck at distributing medicine, because pharmaceutical companies will extort you, as senior citizens are complaining about every day. Even those that love capitalism, you know, they're still saying, "I can't afford my meds. Help me." Okay. Then you got to go the next step. You got to take that next step. Free college, okay, that's good. What about free housing? Why? Why do we have landlords in charge of the housing market? Why do we have people like Jared Kushner in charge of tons of housing developments right here in Baltimore and in Maryland? These aren't good people that are going to efficiently allocate resources according to capitalism and get you in the best home for your buck. These are fucking slumlords who are going to take every penny you have and kick your ass out of the street. And then when there's a ton of homelessness in San Francisco, in Baltimore, and even in New York, the same Republicans who are fucking making a mint off of your back are going to come back and say, well, you suck as a mayor of that city. That's why there's so homelessness. Fuck you. The Democrats should have went way further in terms of saying, hey, you know, let's take more things out of capitalism. Let's take housing out of capitalism. Let's take food out of capitalism. Like, we already do so much to prop up the farmers. Why not just nationalize that whole fucking system? You would be able to have small farmers starting up new farms. You know, it would be a whole different world. There are so many things that we don't need to be in capitalism. And, you know, and you gotta innovate on this, because Marx was a smart guy. He knew that certain industries shouldn't be in capitalism, but we're in a society right now that I don't think he could have dreamed of in terms of information technology and computers and light speed electronics. I mean, these are all new innovations, and we should be putting on our thinking caps and imagining a better world instead of continuing to fight defensively and say, no, we just want Medicare for all and then we'll stop. No, we just want free college and then we'll stop. No, go further. Go further. Show that socialism is more efficient. Prove it.
I agree with that 100%. And it made me, I saw this tweet from John Delaney. I pulled it up on the share screen. I saw this morning. I'm sure I think it happened yesterday. But it highlights exactly what you were talking about. Medicare for all is not the right thing to be talking about. The right answer is not to turn a whole healthcare system on its head. The right answer is universal testing for free, treatments and vaccines ASAP for free, and money to states and hospitals. That's fucking Medicare for all, you dumb shit. Like, but not even that. Like, he can't even in his head wrap around what he's talking about is the exact thing that people have been screaming about, honestly, since Kennedy proposed it.
we have to stop thinking like the capitalist class. John Delaney is a perfect example of that. He's a traditional Democrat. He is such an idiot. I was going to say for a second, he was the first one to run for president, right? And then he says literally in his pitch for presidency, I'm going to do really well because I'm in Maryland, which is very blue, but I'm in a very rural district, which is red. No, you're not. Your district was freaking gerrymandered, created perfectly for you to get into Congress. Nobody likes you other than the people that gave you that seat. And it's the exact same thing happened to Dutch Ruppersberger here in Maryland. Maryland is so gerrymandered, it's insane. And on top of that, O'Malley, when he went around thinking he was going to be president again, he literally said, yes, I gerrymandered Maryland, and yes, I do it again. And why? Because the Republicans did it. That is a fucking stupid answer. You should be ashamed as any political party for saying because the other side does it, I'm going to do it. It's a terrible way to exist. It means you stand for nothing. But I just want to point out that he's saying, okay, how about just free healthcare? How about just free testing? How about just free vaccines? No, that doesn't work because you're talking about the medical system, right? Let's say you just gave free tests. So now I have the ability to test. And let's say I know I have cancer or I know I have coronavirus, but I have no treatment. That doesn't make any sense. No one's going to participate in that system. They want to know, I walk into a medical system, I'll be taken care of. If I walk into a hospital and faint, they'll do what's best for me no matter what they find in my internal organs, not check my insurance information and kick my ass out of the hospital when the insurance company says they're not going to pay anymore. That's the difference of the two systems. That's a socialist system versus a fucking capitalist system. And you know what? It's not that we're asking for bureaucrats behind the scenes in DC to make decisions. We're asking for doctors, nurses, X-ray technicians to say, well, this guy's got a fucking giant tumor. We got to call a surgeon right now to take care of this. Not some bureaucrat. That's what we're calling for. And that, I think, is what libertarians have to understand. Socialized medicine means that your doctor, your nurse, your X-ray technician works with your family to help you decide what's best for you. Even if you have no family, even if you're homeless, you walk into a hospital, the people that actually do the work, we call them the workers. They make the decisions. That's what we're asking for with socialization, with socialism. That's what we're asking for. We're not asking for another bureaucrat. We're not switching out bureaucrats between corporate bureaucrat and Trump bureaucrat, in DC. It's not happening here. We're talking about doctors and nurses. And guess what? That same thing's going to happen when it comes to farms. That same thing's going to happen when it comes to people who are in charge of housing. Could you imagine if actually a housing co-op was just like given the right to its own public housing project or its own like vast amount of unoccupied homes here in Baltimore? They would make the right decision for the people who live there in terms of making it fair and nice and putting up parks and maintaining it. It's a common concept. I've had my people in my own family say to me, well, socialism doesn't work because you're giving away people stuff and they're not going to take good care of it. It's like, no, that's not what we're talking about at all. We're talking about people that, we're talking about a system where people that actually have day-to-day interaction with the stuff on the floor, whether it's a factory worker, whether it's a nurse, whether it's a farmer, whether it's someone who goes to your sewers every day, make sure your pipes are working, whether it's someone that climbs your poles, on the streets, people that do work for utilities, such as like electrical workers or communications workers, that they have the ability to say, hey, boss, we need to order a part to fix this pole to make sure that people in this area are going to have electricity. So we order a pipe to make sure people in this area are going to have enough to get their water. That's the kind of thing where socialism is. And if it means all these guys because they're simply not efficient at minding their own damn systems, then that's what it means. It's as simple as that. And Marx, this has been a long time socialist understanding. If you want to run a business, have a nice jewelry business, or have a nice business where you make dog jewelry or make a dog, be a dog groomer, or I don't know, what else could you do? You can make like really, really nice accessories for your car, or like maybe really nice hats, like things people don't need. If you want to be a capitalist, make something people don't need but they want. But if it's something that people need or something people that use on a daily basis to better their lives, it should be fucking free. It should be fucking free. I mean, it's not gonna improve our society if it's not. If you could sit around all day and tell me, oh, it's too expensive. It's not too expensive when you're spending 1.5 trillion a day on the stock market to keep fucking capitalism afloat. No, it's not more expensive. I can tell you right now, it's not.
And let's not forget that back starting in like September, they were dumping millions of dollars into tens of millions, hundreds of millions into Federal Reserve banks because the economy was starting to tank. The quantitative easing had caught up. There's a used car, a fucking auto loan bubble that is about to fucking just break wide open at any minute. And now we are in a situation where it's either work from home if you can, or if you don't specifically have a doctor's note saying that you have fucking COVID-19, your ass better be in here. And they're public service economy gigs. They're fucking, like, these are people that have to deal with people all the time. And like, yo, dude, yeah, I go to the bar for food on my lunch break at work because it's close and it's cheap. Like, I don't even drink, and I go to the fucking biker bar like basically every day for work for lunch because it's fucking, I trust the food, I know the cook, the fucking like it never cost me more than like $10 or $11 to eat lunch. And when that cook gets told you have to come to work unless you have a doctor's note, dude's not going to take off work to go to the doctor to get a note. He's just going to come in sick, or he's going to lose his job. And like, that's what capitalism has produced.
We can't even imagine a better world for ourselves. I think that's how bad it's. I'm going to say something a little controversial to even my other socialists, but why not? I've been saying that all day. Is I think that it's not so much about capitalism as it is about classism. Like, they want you to feel that the people up here, because they make more money than you, or because they have a shit ton of more, because they were able to get a degree that you couldn't get, or because they're in a better position in life for one way or another, or they're your boss, simple as that, know better than you. That's the system that they want to impose. And I think if you really understand what socialists are trying to do, they're trying to say that no, it's way more complicated, it's way more distributed than that. Like, it's actually about the fact that if that person that does that job says they could do it more efficiently or do it better, they should be empowered to do it more efficiently or better. And in fact, the whole notion of a boss capitalist class is just asinine and stupid, because right now you have a system where if I do tech support for a living. So if I go to a customer and they say, hey, I need my server to work ASAP, coronavirus is coming, get the server back online. I'll tell them, hey, you need this new part, you need this new server, that kind of thing. And they'll make the decision whether or not they can afford it or not. Okay, like, I understand that's how traditionally we're all taught to think. I get that. But why can't we empower the actual workers who are on that front line? Let's say a factory worker that says, hey, this belt is way out of date on this factory floor, and we need a new belt in right away. That way workers don't get hurt. Why can't we empower them to just go ahead and get a new belt? Why can't we just empower them to talk directly to the belt workshop and say, hey, belt workshop, this is a safety concern here for our factory, to get a new belt for our conveyor system so people don't die? Like, why do we think that we're so stupid that we can't make those decisions on our own? We trust our doctors to make those decisions. We even trust nurses to make those decisions. Like, we trust a nurse to look at a chart and say, oh, okay, this is what the patient needs. I'm going to go get the supplies, that kind of thing. Why can't we do that in other parts of society as well? Why can't we do that with people that are repairing our pipes or fixing our houses or We're rehabbing our homes. We just don't do that. We just don't have the, they don't give anyone the authority to say that you've been doing this job as a factory worker for 10, 15 years, or you've been doing this job as a construction worker for 10, 15 years. We trust that you're going to know what's safest for your site. We trust that you're going to know what your people need. We're not going to give you the cheapest material and then tell you that the capitalists know better. And that's what's happening now. That is the definition of capitalism. They're constantly telling you, we know better. We are the capitalists. We own the business. You didn't make a business, did you? You didn't have the foresight to plunk down millions of dollars like I did, huh? You didn't have the connection with the bank. You didn't have the ability to get that rich mother and father that I had help me start my business, huh? And then Democrats are the worst because Democrats will then insult Donald Trump because they hate him for getting, millions of dollars from his daddy and from his daddy before that. But they don't go to the next step and say, oh, wait, that's every fucking capitalist. Wait, that's the problem with the system, not just with Donald Trump. We've got to take this to a set conclusion. We have to stop acting like idiots. I can promise you that if people had more autonomy and they knew for certain that they lived in a world where their basic needs will be taken care of. Like if I knew that every small town in America had ample supply of toilet paper for a month for every one of its citizens, because they just knew that that's the smart thing to do. I'm going to stock enough supplies in my small shop to make sure everyone in my area has enough access to stuff, because I'm not a dipshit, because I care about people in my town, because I want people to have access to stuff. I'm not going to gouge them. I'm not going to overcharge them. I'm going to tell the folks that make the toilet paper in the factory that's also socialist that they need to send X amount of toilet paper to my shop. But I can guarantee you that if coronavirus hits that world, that people aren't going to be hoarding. They'll be putting a call into the shop saying, hey, Sam, you got enough toilet paper for a month? Okay, great. I'll be in when I need more. That's the idea of socialism. It's such a stupid concept. It kind of pisses me off that I have to be on your show today even talking about such a sane, rational concept. It's like day one when we go to elementary school, we go to kindergarten, where people are like, okay, everyone share, no one take more than they need, everyone be polite to each other. And then day two in first grade, it's like, fuck that, capitalism's here, let's go. How are you going to make some money? How are you going to invest? Are you rich? Are you poor? Are you in the poor school? Are you in the good school? It's just nonsense. It's just complete nonsense.
Are you familiar with Todd Snyder?
I am not, no.
Singer songwriter. All right, man. He's been around for quite a while now. He's one of my favorite musicians in general, just because of the way that he does his show. And it's like half stand up and half story songs, and I get a big kick out of that. But he's got a song called the Ballad of the Kingsman, and in this song, he says, so he's talking about war. He says, and when that happened, people get shot. And when people get shot, they show it on TV a lot every night at 6 o'clock. And you don't even have to be 18 to see it. You don't even have to be in first grade. First grade, where they teach the kid the pride that he's going to need to thrive in a world where they say that only the strong will survive Monday through Friday while he stares at the floor till Sunday. They make him go to school once more. Only this time they make him wear a suit and a tie and make him listen to some guy who claims to know where people go when they die. Tells him that only the meek are going to inherit the earth. Well, shit. By this time, how can anyone's kid know what anything is worth? And it's fucking... Well, I'm going to stop before I just go through the whole song. But that's where we're at. I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine. I don't even know if you know this, but Friday night when we wrapped our events in DC for the week, we went out to Ben's Chili Bowl in the neighborhood there, and I had found out that a good friend of mine named Brant Dunn, who I used to play music with, I was in a couple of different bands with him when I lived in Colorado. He's in Annapolis, and he was playing Friday night, a little bar in Annapolis, and I'm like, well, fuck it, man, let's go. So a few of us went, got to see my homie, hung out. We've had conversations over the years about how the system that we live in is designed to so thoroughly psychologically break us that by the time we're of working age, not only do we have multiple personalities, because you've got to be one person to your parents, one person to a different set of adults, one person to your friends. Maybe you don't even know who the fuck you are. Of course you're confused. um, and by the time that you go to get that job, unless by an accident of birth you're handed everything on a fucking silver platter, you are so psychologically broken and so just tied to the dollar
Mhm.
that you will take whatever bullshit job is handed to you if you can't afford the education to get a better job. You will take long hours for shit pay and no benefits just because you have to do that. And we're creating more and more psychologically broken fucking people every single year. The system isn't designed to be sustainable. The system is designed to break and to weed out the people that aren't going to produce as much for the owner class or the predator class, as Jason Burmis calls them.
Yeah, I think that is so dead on. I mean, that's why so many parents, when they're instilling values into their kids, in my generation anyway, were out there kind of saying over and over again, this is the message I got when I was growing up: you must be moderately wealthy. I mean, you must have a decent income. You must be something that capitalism appreciates, such as doctor, lawyer, like top tier engineer, like you got to be something of merit to the capitalist class, something that, the rulership class actually covets and wants to pay a little bit more than the person that you have way more in common with, but that you kind of have disdain for, which is the poor working class. The guy working a service industry job just to get by, or the person working 2 or 3 jobs, coddling something together because they can't make enough in one. Like you're taught to have disdain for that. You're really taught, like, that person is a good person, but they made some poor life choices, and you got to make better life choices. And these are the better life choices that you should make. And the system has so broken down, because I think that there are so many people now that fell for that had that education, maybe a doctorate level education, and can't find decent work, or master's level education and are just drowning in debt. I've helped a lot of people personally move from getting a master's in something that isn't going to make them any money, even though they were just told anything you get a master's in going to make you a lot of money, to working in tech support and IT, for very, very large companies where they can make a decent living. And that's just the way capitalism is. It's just the way capitalism is. It doesn't really put value in those things that make sense. I mean, if capitalism made sense, I think you'd see every migrant worker not just being welcomed into the U.S., but also being given 6-figure jobs, because we need those people. Otherwise, we don't have food and we die. Like that's kind of the paradox of capitalism. But I also kind of want to just point out, I'm working on 2 new projects here that kind of like dovetail into this. So before the coronavirus, I started working on this project called the Anti-Imperialist Institute. And I want to bring more awareness to anti-imperialist voices out there, because there's so many people who, I disagree with. Obviously, I have philosophical disagreements with folks that are libertarian or Trump anti-war supporters. But, I think that there's a lot to be gained by bringing folks together to the table, and highlighting the difference between a reform socialist who believes in imperialism, who believes in the U.S. exceptionalism bullshit, and a revolutionary socialist like myself that understands that thinking is toxic, and it leads to nationalism, and it leads to war, despair, and destruction. I think that there's really something to that. I think we've got to really start to have a international conversation about why it is that why it is that uh, uh, why it is that we don't have that national conversation or international apparatus. And if we're also against it, what's going on here? Like, why can't we kind of get it together? Why can't we have a really robust anti-imperialist, anti-war movement in the U.S.? And I feel like personally, it's because a lot of the socialist organizations out there have just kind of abandoned anti-imperialism as a subject. I mean, Bernie Sanders, I'm going to give him credit where credit is due. He is critical of Israel. He's definitely pro-Palestine in certain areas. But that being said, like, anti-imperialism understands that we just got lied into a war with Syria, basically. And, the forces behind the scenes kind of juggling our involvement in that country don't really have our best interest at heart, aren't really true anti-war factions, aren't really trying to end the conflict. They're more to exploit it one way or another. That's the kind of conversation that I'm interested in bringing out through anti-imperialism, the Anti-Imperialist Institute. I'm going to try to do at least once a month some big speakers on Zoom and let them really battle it out a little bit. Because a lot of folks that were my first experience of anti-imperialism are poor folks who are with movements like the Every Mother's a Working Mother or National Welfare Rights. They understand that the more money spent on war, the less money spent at home, when it comes to welfare institutions or the things they need to survive. And they kind of have that survivalist element that this is what they need to survive. They need to just take it. And how come we're always so easy for us in the U.S. to say, China bad, or, this African country is horrible on human rights. But we don't take a look inward and say, we have all these homeless, we have people who lack healthcare, we have people who lack education. And yet, only now, because of the coronavirus, do we kind of highlight that a little bit and say, oh shit, lack of people going to school, of different abilities to quarantine themselves, or people that are sick that now work for me are going to be able to get me infected in one way or another. So those that lack healthcare actually are we're only as strong as our weakest link as a society. It's as simple as that. So we've got to make sure everyone is as strong as everyone else when it comes to healthcare. It's kind of that simple. But we don't really think about that until a crisis hits. And I think that, I want to focus a little bit on the U.S.'s role as being an imperialist power. And also, I've been trying to share some stuff out there. I know it's not as popular as my other stuff, but I think people really should bring themselves to the attention of work like organizations called Sanctions Kill, which is a pretty self-explanatory organization. And it literally is talking about the mass graves of people that we're burying, people that Iranians are burying right now over in Iran because we sanction them so much that they can't get basic health supplies. I mean, when we talk about sanctions, we're not talking about freezing. We're not just talking about freezing a bank account. We're talking about denying a country the ability in a global marketplace to buy basic essentials for their people. We're basically trying to foment dissent at the hand of death, because people will die because of these, into the folks in that country to revolt, overthrow, and install someone new that is more U.S. friendly. That is literally the point of a lot of these sanctions. People have to understand that. It's no coincidence that this week, at the same week where coronavirus was in the headline, Iraq and Iran being the subject of bombings by the U.S. was all of a sudden back in the news too. Like, the capitalist class is using every effort to exploit this crisis. And they're not doing a very good job. I think those of us that are paying attention realize that, a lot of things you're saying about China don't make any sense. You're praising China one minute, the next minute you're criticizing them. Come on, it doesn't even make any sense. The other thing I want to just mention briefly, a little closer to what we've been talking about today, is ever since I ended my political campaign for president, one of the most interesting things for me has been this talk about like a human rights-based economy. It's something that I kind of came up with when running for office. And I think it better sparks the imagination of people who are struggling with the notion of thinking about socialism in that old style, draconian style socialism. We're not talking about giving the government more power or authority. We're talking about changing the focus of our economy so that human rights, and that means the right not just to create a small business or to own a gun, that means the right to actually live, healthcare, housing, food, clothing, being able to access things like the media, like the internet, like you need for everything nowadays. I think it'd be very hard to imagine someone saying at this point if the internet is a luxury. Obviously not. But also things like transportation too. In a world where we're increasingly worried about climate change, and rightfully so, because that's the other big threat the scientists are telling us about. We ignored coronavirus. I don't know why we're going to keep ignoring climate change as a climate emergency. That means that we're going to have free or very, very low cost public transportation in this country. So that when I want to get to my mom in Florida, I can hop on a train at a very, very reduced cost or no cost, and not have to worry about booking different airlines, which are going to, create a climate emergency, or getting in my car and spending a bunch of money on gas. And people are going to say electric cars, but electric cars are not affordable to everyone, and they need a lithium and all that too. So these are the conversations that we're not really having, because we don't really put the human rights potential ahead of the capitalist class right now. We're kind of doing the opposite. What makes money? That's what gets invested in. It needs to be the other way around. What do people need to live? That's where investment needs to go. If that's housing in urban areas and rural areas, great. If that's public transportation, that's great. If it's infrastructure like sewers, internet, that's great. We have to completely redo the way we think about investment, and we have to empower more people to feel like they personally can get out there and make a difference and help, and not have to go into poverty doing so. That they will be taken care of like everyone else in this society. It's incredibly important. It's human rights-based economy, human rights-based engagement, because only at that point do we have the credibility. Once we start to seriously tackle that internally in the U.S., then at that point we have the ability to engage other countries and say, no, we seriously are going to eliminate poverty in this country. Here's how we're doing it. How are you doing it, other countries? We seriously are tackling healthcare in this country. How are you doing it, other countries? We're seriously making sure every migrant that comes to our borders is going to be taken care of and respected. How are you going to do that? And only at that, because right now you hear as of last month, you hear a lot about China, mistreatment of minorities in China. But you can go into Baltimore City, ask folks how they feel about being treated as a poor black person in public housing in Baltimore City, getting kicked to the curb and having no access to resources. Literally just the other week, someone here in Baltimore had to be hospitalized along with two other people for such a bad mold epidemic in their housing project to put them in the hospital. It may have actually killed the person. Yeah, it's pretty egregious. So you don't really have a leg to stand on. We're not going to evolve as a species. We're not going to, our humanity is not going to save us unless we actually start to put it first and foremost in our economic efforts. And that means completely undoing a lot of what we believe in capitalism. And I've been saying it for a while, and I'm going to continue to say it and continue to talk about it. That means taking things out of the economy, out of the capitalist economy, and moving it into a different part of the economy, and a part of the economy where we can say, this is a need. How are we going to address this need? You can call it socialism. You can call it human rights-based economics. You can call it libertarian fuckfest. I don't really give a shit. Just get it done. That's what I care about. I care about a part of the economy where you can actually get stuff done and make sure the needs of people are met. And as long as you're with me on making sure the needs of people are met, then I consider you my ally.
And I think that the way that we get there, or one of the ways we get there, is by agreeing that the free flow of information is also a fundamental right. And what we're trying to do through Action for Assange, and I just realized we have a meeting in about 20 minutes, so I'm gonna have to wrap up here shortly. What we're doing with Action for Assange is trying to move the conversation into a post-partisan realm, and it's like one of the bigger uphill battles, But with that flag, our WikiLeaks flag, that represents post-partisanship, where there's people from every ideology on that flag, people you wouldn't believe. Michael fucking Flynn Jr. signed that flag. I'm not even kidding. um, but it's a statement that without the free flow of information, without accurate information from a primary source that isn't being spun, we can't have a legitimate or honest conversation. We can't have an honest conversation about a human rights based economy because there's 60, 70 years of propaganda that come into the play. There's the manufactured confusion. That's the sole function of the mainstream media right now, in order to create nonsense issues that divide people, or to spread counter reinforcing propaganda, which seems like people are ideologically opposed, but they're in 100% agreement on certain issues, like taking, deregulating every industry possible, bombing the shit out of brown people, making sure that we have a surveillance state and a fucking prison society and shit, like uh, the reasoning behind all of that is to keep us from having these conversations. It's to keep the free flow of information being something that's pointed to as either tinfoil hattery or soon to be illegal. In the event 201, are you familiar with this, Ian? 44
No,
days before it was announced that the coronavirus was out, there was a thing called Event 201. I'll put the link to from John Hopkins in there because they put it on with coordination from the Bill Gates Foundation. And it's really one of the I always look it up through DuckDuckGo. But I stuck it in the Zoom chat there. Yeah. They have a video of the highlights of it, and basically it was a simulated exercise as to what would happen if there was a pandemic with some sort of coronavirus, and here's what it would look like. And what it looked like was 65 million dead in China alone. What it looks like in the US is at least 1.5 million people, with untold numbers of people that have permanent lung damage from this thing. And the conclusion was, just like every other pandemic scenario that we put forth since we started doing this in 2001, the United States is woefully unprepared for this event, because our way of tackling it traditionally has been, how can we turn a buck off of this? Lord Baron de Rothschild said, when there's a panic, you buy, even if the blood in the streets is your own, you buy. And like that philosophy has permeated throughout not just how government works and not just how business works, but how everyday people view the world around them.
Yeah, actually, no, I had heard of that study. I didn't know the name of it, but I appreciate that and the link to it. I didn't see the original article, but I heard of it. And man, if there's one thing I think we have to change, it's that, why does it take a crisis like the coronavirus to put the idea that the dead and the casualties and the pain and suffering of millions of people is something the media should pay attention to like a laser? Why all of a sudden is this? I hear a lot of Republicans, a lot of pro-Trump Republicans saying this is all a big scam because, the flu kills people and this is going to kill people too. So effing what? And you know what? That is kind of the mentality that the media puts us in. When we hear about a shooting on the news, We go, is it our family? Someone I know? No? All right. Well, maybe you shouldn't have been there in the first place. When you hear about someone dying from lung cancer, you go, well, maybe they shouldn't have been smoking. You hear about someone dying from the flu, you go, well, I don't know, should have got vaccinated, or maybe you hate vaccinations and you say, should have drank some special juice because you're crazy. I don't know, Like the whole point is that you don't care about deaths. We don't care about people dying. It's just not in, it's in our nature, in our village or in our family to care about someone dying. We bury the dead. We care deeply about that. But for some reason, on a national scale or an international scale, it takes the crisis for us to come together and say, no, 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 we don't want millions of people to die. We want to make sure people have every opportunity to live. We want to make sure we can save lives. Like, I actually think that this is the only silver lining I could take out of the coronavirus, to be frank with you, is that it's completely reshaping our brains, because it's completely reshaping our media landscape overnight. Overnight, people are like, not just the stock market going up and down in everyday news, but also the coronavirus death toll is in everyday news. We should do that every day. Every day we should say, here's how many people died around the world. And you know what? You should give a shit. You should care about how many people die on a daily basis on our planet. Like, the idea that you should actually, as a person, sitting here in your daily job with your lives, should care about other people overseas dying or in the streets here in the U.S. is a new concept that we now need to make the new normal. We now need to tell people, like, we're going to readjust, and this is going to be a permanent thing. If you're going to get out there and say, no, 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 Medicare for all, too expensive, free college, too expensive, all this shit's too expensive, it's all other people's money, young people just want that, you have to say, yes, I am a young person, and I care about people all over the world dying, and I'm going to use my breath and life to make sure that it doesn't happen. And I don't give a shit what you call that system. You could call it whatever you want. I just want to make sure that people don't fucking die. And this should be the new normal. Even after the coronavirus is over, people should celebrate, but then we should still have that evening death toll. Who's dying of what around the world? How can we end people's suffering? How can we make our existence on Earth the safest possible? How are we going to go colonize other planets and other worlds if we can't make existence in the planet of Earth better for every single fucking person? I mean, this is just asinine stupidity. Sometimes I think if there are aliens watching us, they're just shaking their heads and saying these morons are going to kill themselves. No way they're going to get to Saturn or another galaxy, let alone the fucking moon. I mean, this is just real stupidity. So we've really got to look at ourselves in the mirror as a species, as a planet, and say, what's wrong with me if I don't care about people dying every day? What made the coronavirus different? Why doesn't the nightly news have a wrap up for health and safety and people's lives and people's education? We should get a nightly recap of I don't care about the fucking stock market. Give me a news update every day. How many people are graduating from college that day? How many new doctors will there be? How many new factory workers will there be? How many new people will there be to farm? Give us statistics that make sense. How much arable farmland is there? Do we have enough food to feed everyone on the planet? Do we have enough housing to go around? That's the kind of information I want to see on the evening news, in addition to all the people that died that day and why they died. Our mission as a species should be make sure that every single person on this earth gets the chance to die of a nice old age surrounded by loved ones. That should be our responsibility as a species. The nightly news should be talking about that. And if one person dies of a car crash or a heart attack, we should be saying, what could have been done to prevent this? We don't want that to happen to our own family. How do we fix that here in the U.S.? How do we fix that globally? That should be what we do.
That's fucking far out, solid, and right on there, Ian. This is exactly what, since the beginning of this show, what you're basically talking about is what I call a collective ascension. And
Right.
that's really what we need so badly as a species. It's not any particular system. It's not any particular ism. All of our isms have failed us miserably. And a
Yeah.
lot of that has to do with we always attack the systems that work because they're not making enough money. You know, our
Right.
the way that we've been taught to think about every aspect of society is just so counter fucking intuitive. It drives me crazy. But we do need a I guess a evolvement of thought. My friend Ben Balderson, he says a revolution just brings you right back around to where you started. That's technically what a revolution is, and what we need is a transition. We need an ascension. We need to um, be able to look at the world around us as this is my community. I live in a large community, and if I can't make my community sustainable, my community will not exist in the future. Um, Ian, I gotta go. I love
Yeah.
having you on the show. Come back anytime you want, and please, like convey my well wishes to Reverend Annie. Um, I would like to be able to have a conversation with her as well eventually. Please let the folks know where they can find you and where they can find out more information about the campaigns that you're working on, about the act about your activism.
Absolutely, and Reverend Chambers says as soon as she's healthy and back up again, and she always says she's going to live to 90 or 100 because all of her family members do. So don't worry, she'll be around for a while. She'll be back and ready to be on the show, Steve. So she really appreciates it. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm most active on Twitter. I Schlakman, Ischlakman on Twitter. And check out my website, schlakman.com, schlakman.com. And, I'm starting up some new things, with everyone, with everyone able to be home during the coronavirus. I think this is the right time to, start up some podcasts and I've been thinking about doing. I'm going to get started on that. And then, like I said, the Anti-Imperialist Institute and also the Human Rights-Based Economics. There's a project coming up, and I'm going to put all that on my website. So check out schlakman.com, bookmark it, and we'll see you over there soon.
Hell yeah. Um,
Thanks for having me on, man.
oh,
Really appreciate it.
thank you. I enjoy our conversations very, very much.
Me too.
For the folks that are watching, if you have not clicked the subscribe button to the show and you're digging it, please go ahead and do that. It's YouTube. It doesn't guarantee you get a notification, but I am live every Sunday from 10 to noon Pacific, 1 to 3 Eastern, every Wednesday. Um, Although I think hopefully this week it'll be 6 p.m. Pacific. We're trying to start a little bit earlier. The Free
Cool.
Assange Vigil comes at you every single week. We are not going to stop what we're doing. We may not be able to host live teach-ins, but we're going to be working with people to see where if we can get um, multiple watch parties, and or we're going to distribute the teach-ins to the people who run activism groups and organizations so that they can then disseminate it to the people that belong to those groups. Um, we're gonna go extra hard on this because May 18th is still on the calendar. It still is the start of the second round of Julian's extradition hearing. We are just shy of 2 months away from that, and there is a lot of work to be done on that front. Everyone's going to be fucking quarantined and able to watch a bunch of streaming content. You know, fucking let's try and be good finders here. Um, so yes, every Sunday, 10 to noon Pacific, 1 p.m. to 3 Eastern. Every Wednesday, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Free Assange Vigil. Free Assange Vigil is going to be giving you a lot more content in the next couple of months. So please look for that. Thank you for being a part of this with me. I love you guys. You fucking rock. Until next time, this has been Slow News Day. I'm Steve Boykinen, and good luck to us all.